unfortunately, the questor of the European Parliament decided that this exhibition could not be approved. It was too controversial. We were told that apparently this exhibition would damage the dignity and image of the European Parliament. With all due respect, I would venture that it's not the exhibition, but it's censorship that is a damage to Parliament's dignity. Who would have thought that artwork criticizing human rights violations would be considered too controversial for the European Parliament? In this context, I'm reminded of the often deafening silence in Europe during the brutal crackdown of the Iran protests, and also the lack of condemnation from here in Brussels vis-à-vis Iran's violation of the Israeli airspace just last weekend. So there seem to be some people in Europe who would rather not address Iranian human rights violations and Iranian aggression, and would also rather that others don't do it, but here we are, we're doing it anyway. So let me now hand over to Yair Lapid. Please, take the floor.
Thank you and good afternoon. We live in a world which refuses to differentiate between truth and lies, which is afraid to differentiate between good and evil, between the just and the unjust. The decision made by the European Parliament to ban these caricatures around us, makes a caricature out of the Parliament, the European Parliament. It isn't tolerance, but a caricature of tolerance. If the European Parliament cannot distinguish between the murderers and the ones who are murdered, between the victims of terror and the terrorists, then what are its values? What does it represent? The enemies of democracy, led by Iran, have learned how to use Western democratic values against us. They have learned to speak the language of human rights while they murder people who are fighting for those rights. They have learned to express hurt and dismay at the slightest criticism, while they imprison and torture anyone who dares criticize them. To talk about democracy, while they use the tools of democracy, the free press, the social media, to spread their ideology of death and destruction. If these caricatures were aimed at the United States or at Israel, no one would have banned them. Why then they were banned? The Iranians cannot tolerate criticism. The supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei, has personally ordered terror attacks all around the globe. He says his aim is the total eradication of the Jewish state. So, does the European Parliament believe that this man, who speaks openly about the murder of millions of people, who still desires a nuclear weapon, is too sensitive, too fragile, to withstand some caricatures in Brussels? The reason this exhibition was banned, that all 28 caricatures displayed here were banned, is that the European Parliament is afraid to pick a side, afraid to take a stand. But in doing so, it is undermining the moral rationale for its own existence. Terrorism, as its name suggests, seeks to sow fear. Its main arena isn't the pavement of Paris, the streets of Brussels, the nightclubs of Paris, or the underground in London. The main arena is consciousness. Its main aim, is to cause us to live in constant fear, to change our behavior, weaken our resolve, and abandon our values. The European Parliament rewarded terror this time. There is only one reason that this exhibition was cancelled: fear. They remember what happened in Charlie Hebdo. They remember the violent demonstration in 2006 after the publication of the cartoons of Muhammad in Denmark. and they're afraid it will happen to them. That fear caused them to cast aside democratic values, which are the foundation of the European Union, of the Western world. In the battle between values and fear, this time values lost. And yet values may have lost the battle, but not the war. That's why we're here. That's why we insisted together on opening this exhibition today. That's why the exhibition will now be shown also in Israel and in the United States, to remind the world of a simple truth. Iran is an Islamist, terror-supporting dictatorship. It is the world's greatest funder and exporter of terrorism. It stands behind Hezbollah and Hamas. It is fully complicit in the murder of 500,000 people in Syria, in terror attacks in Europe, in Latin America, and of course, in the Middle East. Iran oppresses women, executes LGBT people, and is engaged in torture and inhuman punishment. These aren't narratives. These aren't part of a PR campaign. These are facts which have been proven time and time again. These facts are the basis of this exhibition, which you see here today. If the European Parliament would have remembered its own history, the history of Europe, then they would have known that democracy, human rights, and freedom were never just handed out. They always needed to be fought for. We need to fight for them. There were always those who tried to take these rights away. The enemies of freedom are not only those who tried to impose tyranny and terror, but also those who remained silent. I thank all those here today for refusing to remain silent, especially members of parliament, Andres Vistisen, Peter Niedermüller, who are here with us today, and last Adak Tucson and Petrias Ostrihavicius, who couldn't come here today. They represent almost the entire spectrum of the European Parliament, and their support shows that there are those who will always stand up for the values we believe in, who will stand up for the truth. I'd also like to thank the AGC and the talented cartoonists of the TICP who gave of their time and talent to fight for justice and hope against censorship and violence. Sometimes it is not enough to fight for human spirit, you also have to know how to draw it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anders, please.
No, thank you very much for bringing this idea with the cartoons here to Brussels. Unfortunately, in a little bit of a different location than originally thought of. Coming from Denmark, I think across the political spectrum, we have an understanding that satire and criticism is a healthy part of democracy, regardless of who they intend to hit. And I would say oftentimes the royal family of Denmark, even though we love them very much, generally in Denmark, have been portrayed much worse than what you see here today. So it is fundamentally very difficult for me to grasp how cartoons can be hurtful. Of course, you can disagree with the sentiment. Of course, you can dislike the message. But violence is always the fault of the ones who commit it. And I think the same was true when we experienced the Danish so-called cartoon crisis. In Denmark we call it the Mohammed crisis because it was not cartoons that was the problem, it was the picture of Mohammed in cartoons that was seen as a problem. So I think this is a great initiative. I think it also serves to remind us here in the European Union that we should rethink our general outlook on the Iranian regime. As the Vice President of the Foreign Affairs Committee here in the European Parliament, I am oftentimes bedazzled of the hypocrisy when we are estimating countries in the region. I just had the Egyptian ambassador talk to me recently, and he said to me, I cannot really understand why you have more than 5 resolutions in this mandate condemning the use of death penalty in Egypt when you have none doing the same in Iran. And I think it's a valid point. If you really believe that human rights are universal and that a death penalty should be abolished everywhere it exists, maybe you should start with the people who does this crime the most, instead of starting with the friends and allies who are actually working constructively with you. And I think this could have been an eye-opening experience for a number of my colleagues in the European Parliament. I hope that they have signed up for this night's public opening and will come here and see it. I fear they will not, but I think it's an important initiative, and I thank you for coming all the way from Israel to arrange it with us. I thank the AJC for being an excellent partner once more, and I thank Peter Niedermüller for co-hosting and being here. I think he is probably the more courageous of us, because I think he is a little bit more outnumbered in his political family than I am in mine on this standpoint. But nonetheless, I always commend him for taking such a strong view and being such a good friend and ally on this course. So I hope that Peter will also enlighten us with some brilliant remarks. But thank you very much for coming and attending. Thank you, Nats, for bringing this very important issue to the limelight of the European institutions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You're right. I am a little bit a strange body here because I'm coming from the S&D group. But I think so that the European Parliament is not a homogeneous body, let me say on that way. We have different views also in my group and maybe also in your group. And maybe we have some differences if we are talking about political issues between you and myself. But I think so there is one very important point, namely that we are here this afternoon because I think this exhibition is a very important sign of freedom. And I think so this is something which bound us together. We are all working for a free media everywhere in the world, everywhere in Europe. And you are absolutely right, we share the view that human rights are universal. And we have to express that point, and we have to explain that we are not just talking about the member states of the European Union. We are talking, or we try to talk about the whole world, and saying human rights must be always and everywhere a very important value and a very important norm. Of course, I am more than unhappy with the decision of the Quaestor of the European Union. But I would like to underline that she or he, I don't remember exactly, she or he is not equivalent with the European Parliament. We have many MEPs who would support very strongly this exhibition because, as I told you, we believe in freedom, and I think so it's the most important point. And of course, I absolutely agree with you, Mr. Lapid. Iran is one of the most dangerous states today in the world. And we think it's very important to show, with the help of different medias and different tools and institutions, this point. And these wonderful pictures, the wonderful caricatures, they show a very important point, namely that we can do something against this dictatorship. We can show that this dictatorship is very dangerous for us in Europe as well. And therefore, as I told you, I'm really proud to be here this afternoon. And thank you very much for this exhibition. Thank you very much, Daniel, for you and for the EGC to organize it. And first of all, thank you very much, Mr. Lapid, to come to Brussels. Thank you, man.
But not least, I would like to ask at least two of the artists who were able to travel here, Uri Fink and Shai Chakar, to say a few words about their work.
Thank you very much. Okay, so first of all, I'd like to thank the AJC for the wonderful organization and Yair Lapid for supporting us in this case. And this organization is really fantastic. And I thank you all for coming here. And I would like you to share with you, to encourage you to share our project of the TICP, encourage people to share our cartoons all over the world, use Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, whatever. We just want to spread the message. And today with cartoons, you can do it. I'm very proud to be a part of the Israeli Cartoon Project, along with my colleague Shai Chakar, and our fearless leaders, Asaf Finkelstein and Yossi Klar, who are the organizers of the whole thing. And this exhibition is truly an example of the whole point of the project. is to promote freedom and showing, abuses of human rights, and that cartoons are a great tool for debate and argument and expression. And I think this exhibition is indeed offensive. It's offensive to a regime that is oppressing its own people while promoting violence throughout the region. And I hope this exhibit will be our little contribution to help the Iranian people who love cartoons very much, and unless these cartoons are in power. Unless these cartoons are their leaders. Okay. Great. Okay, now try please.
I don't know if you all know, but a week from today, the Jewish people will celebrate Purim. In Shushan, the capital of ancient Persia, Haman, the prime minister, convinced the king Ahasuerus that the Jews are his problem, that they are the ones who are violating his imperial order. Esther, the young Jewish queen, saved the day. She pointed the truth by saying, this is the bad guy here, Haman. He is the one who is really violating the king's order. Us, the cartoonists, we are not the queen. We are only court jesters. But our role is to point the truth, and here it is in front of you, the way we see it. Thank you all for coming.